She did what 12 nannies, 8 doctors, and a billionaire's fortune couldn't do, and she did it in 72 hours. The richest man in Chicago watched his 2-year-old daughter starve for 14 days. Celeste hadn't eaten a single bite. Specialists flew in from across the country with theories, but no answers. Nannies quit in tears, defeated by the silent child who'd given up on living. Then Sheree Jenkins walked through the door. A poor black woman from the South Side with $27 in her purse, scuffed shoes, and a dead daughter buried 3 years ago. She had no medical degree, no credentials, no business being in a billionaire's mansion, but she had a secret, a painful, hard-won understanding about children who stopped fighting for their lives. She didn't bring medicine. She didn't bring fancy therapy. She brought something the mansion had been missing all along. And in 72 hours, she did the impossible. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The hardwood floors of the Ashford estate creaked beneath the weight of silence. In the third-floor nursery overlooking Lake Michigan, 2-year-old Celeste sat motionless in her velvet chair, her tiny hands folded in her lap like a broken doll. Her cheeks had hollowed into shadows. Her skin had turned gray like winter clouds. The pediatrician had left an hour ago with nothing but worried glances and hushed warnings to her father. 14 days without food. 14 days of refusing every spoon, every sip, every desperate voice. The nannies had quit one by one, each of them defeated by the child's silence and the father's ice-cold indifference. Celeste's brown eyes followed the afternoon light streaming through the windows, but she made no sound. Not a cry, not a whimper. She had learned that tears brought no comfort in this house built on money and emptiness. Downstairs in his oak-paneled office, billionaire Donovan Ashford signed contracts without looking up. His assistant brought in the 10th resume of the day. Another maid, another hopeful face who didn't know what she was walking into. Donovan's jaw tightened as he skimmed the paper. Sheree Jenkins, 27, no formal training, raised in the South Side of Chicago. Single mother who'd lost her daughter to illness 3 years ago. References from a church daycare and community center. He almost tossed it aside. Almost. But something in the handwritten note at the bottom made him pause. It read, "I don't know fancy things, but I know hungry hearts. I know what it means when a child stops fighting." He buzzed his assistant. Send her up. He didn't believe in miracles, but he was desperate enough to hire one last fool willing to try. Sheree stood outside the Ashford mansion in Winnetka, clutching her worn purse and whispering a prayer her grandmother had taught her in their small apartment years ago. The building looked like a museum, cold, towering, lifeless despite all its beauty. She had taken 2 buses and the metro train to get here, and her shoes were scuffed from walking the last 3 blocks uphill. When the heavy door opened, a sharp-eyed woman in a gray suit looked her up and down with thinly veiled disdain. "You're the new one?" the woman asked. Her voice clipped. Sheree nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Follow me. You'll meet Mr. Ashford and then see the child. Don't expect warmth. Don't expect thanks. Just do your job, and maybe you'll last longer than the others." Sheree's heart hammered, but she followed silently, her eyes taking in the crystal chandeliers and oil paintings. Wealth didn't intimidate her. Loneliness did, and this place reeked of it like spoiled fruit. Donovan didn't rise when Sheree entered his office. He studied her like she was another piece of furniture to approve or discard. She stood tall despite the second-hand coat and the calluses on her brown hands from years of cleaning other people's homes. "You've read the file?" he asked, his voice flat as concrete. Sheree nodded. "The child hasn't eaten in 2 weeks. Doctors say there's nothing physically wrong. Nannies say she's unreachable. I don't need your pity. I need results." His voice was mechanical, as if he were discussing stock prices and not his daughter's life slipping away. Sheree met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to fix her, Mr. Ashford," she said quietly, her voice steady. I'm here to love her. That's what children need when they've given up. Not another stranger trying to force them back to life. The room went silent. Donovan's eyes narrowed dangerously. He wasn't used to people speaking to him like that. You start today, he said coldly. If she doesn't eat by the end of the week, you're gone like all the rest. Sheree climbed the stairs to the nursery, her pulse racing with each step. The door creaked open, and she saw her. Celeste, so small, so still, so heartbreakingly fragile. Her blonde curls framed a face that looked far older than 2 years, like she'd already lived a lifetime of disappointment. Sheree's throat tightened. She had seen this before. Not starvation of the body, but starvation of the soul. She knelt down slowly on the plush carpet, not reaching out, not speaking. She just sat cross-legged on the floor across from the little girl and began to hum. It was an old gospel song her grandmother used to sing while braiding her hair on Sunday mornings, one that didn't need words to carry hope. Celeste's eyes flickered toward her. Just once, just barely, but it was enough. Sheree closed her eyes and kept humming, letting the melody fill the cold, silent room. Somewhere deep inside that tiny chest, a heart that had forgotten how to hope began to remember what it felt like to be seen. 3 years earlier, Sheree Jenkins had stood in a Chicago hospital room, holding the hand of her daughter who was slipping away. Amara was only 4 years old, her small body ravaged by leukemia that had come too fast and too fierce. Sheree had worked 3 jobs to pay for treatments insurance wouldn't cover, cleaning offices at night, serving breakfast at a diner, and babysitting on weekends. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The bills piled higher than her hope, and the doctors' faces grew more somber with each visit. Amara had stopped eating in those final weeks, not because of the illness, but because she was tired. Tired of needles, tired of pain, tired of watching her mama cry in hospital chairs. Sheree had sung to her every night, the same gospel songs her grandmother had sung, trying to fill her daughter with enough love to make her want to stay. But love couldn't stop what was coming. The day Amara died, Sheree's world collapsed into darkness. She stopped going to church, stopped singing, stopped believing that God heard the prayers of poor black women from the South Side who couldn't even save their own children. Her grandmother found her 3 weeks later, still in the same clothes, staring at Amara's empty bed. "Baby, you can't live in this grave," her grandmother had whispered, wrapping frail arms around her. "Amara's gone to glory, but you're still here. And there are other children out there who need what you have to give." Sheree had shaken her head, unable to imagine loving another child when the wound was still so raw. But her grandmother had been insistent, pulling her to her feet and forcing her to eat, to shower, to live. "You've got a gift, Sheree. You know how to reach children who've lost their way. Don't let grief steal that from you." 6 months later, Sheree started volunteering at a community center in Englewood, working with children who had trauma written in their eyes. Kids whose parents were in prison. Kids who'd seen violence no child should witness. Kids who'd stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped being kids. The staff was amazed at how Sheree could sit with the most broken children and somehow make them feel safe enough to smile again. She didn't use fancy therapy techniques or educational theories. She just loved them. She showed up every single day, remembered their names, noticed when they were sad, celebrated when they were brave. She became the constant in the chaos, the adult who didn't leave when things got hard. And slowly, she began to heal too. Not completely. The hole Amara left would never close. But she learned to live around it, to let her daughter's memory fuel her purpose instead of drown her in despair. When the job posting for the Ashford estate appeared on the community center's bulletin board, Sheree almost walked past it. A live-in maid position for a billionaire's family in Winnetka. It might as well have been on Mars. But the director, Mrs. Patterson, had grabbed her arm. "Read the rest, Sheree. They're desperate. The child won't eat, won't speak. They've gone through 12 nannies in 2 months. This isn't about cleaning. This is about saving a life. And if anyone can reach a child who's given up, it's you." Sheree had stared at the posting, her heart racing. It felt too big, too impossible. She was just a woman from the South Side with a high school diploma and a dead daughter. What could she offer a billionaire's child? But something in her spirit stirred, the same something that had kept her singing to Amara, even when hope was gone. She took the paper down and filled out the application that night. Now, sitting on the floor of Celeste's nursery, Sheree understood why she'd been led here. This child was drowning in the same darkness that had taken Amara. Not illness, not poverty, but something just as deadly. The kind of loneliness that makes a soul stop fighting. The kind that happens when you're surrounded by everything except what matters. Celeste hadn't moved, but her eyes stayed fixed on Sheree now, watching this stranger who didn't demand anything from her. Sheree reached into her bag slowly and pulled out a small stuffed rabbit, worn and faded from years of being loved by Amara. She placed it gently on the floor between them. "This was my daughter's," she said softly. "Her name was Amara. She's in heaven now, but she loved this rabbit more than anything. I think she'd want you to have it." Celeste's tiny hand twitched. It was the first voluntary movement she'd made in days, and in that moment, Sheree knew this was exactly where she was supposed to be. Donovan Ashford stood at his office window, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. He should have been upstairs checking on his daughter. He knew that, but he couldn't bring himself to climb those stairs and face what he'd allowed to happen. Celeste had become a stranger to him, or perhaps he'd become a stranger to her. He couldn't remember the last time he'd held her, really held her, not just the awkward pats on the head when photographers were present. His ex-wife Vanessa had been right about him. "You're already married, Donovan," she'd said the day she left. "You're married to your empire, and there's no room in your heart for anything else." He dismissed her words as dramatic, the complaints of a woman who didn't understand what it took to build what he'd built. But watching his daughter waste away upstairs, he wondered if Vanessa had seen something in him that he'd been too blind to see in himself. His phone buzzed with the 100th message of the day. Stock prices, merger updates, board meeting agendas. The world kept spinning, kept demanding his attention, and he gave it willingly because it was easier than facing the failure happening under his own roof. His assistant knocked softly. "Sir, the new maid has been with Celeste for 2 hours. Do you want an update?" Donovan shook his head. "Let me know if anything changes." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, with respect, maybe you should see for yourself. The child's eyes are open. She's watching Ms. Jenkins. That's more than we've seen in days." Something flickered in Donovan's chest, something that felt uncomfortably like hope. He crushed it immediately. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. Better to expect nothing and be pleasantly surprised than to believe in miracles. That never came. "I'll check on them tomorrow," he said dismissively. "I have calls to make tonight." The truth was, Donovan was terrified. Terrified of that nursery and the tiny girl who looked so much like her mother. Vanessa had left when Celeste was only 6 months old, unable to handle Donovan's emotional absence and his obsession with work. She'd fought for custody, but Donovan's lawyers were better than hers, and his money spoke louder than her tears. The judge had ruled in his favor, citing his financial stability and Vanessa's history of depression. Vanessa had walked out of that courtroom looking destroyed, and Donovan had felt victorious. But victory tasted like ash when he brought Celeste home and realized he had no idea how to be a father. He'd hired nannies, the best money could buy, and convinced himself that was enough. Children needed food, shelter, education, opportunities. He could provide all of that. He never stopped to ask what else they might need. Everything had fallen apart 2 months ago when Celeste started refusing her bottle. At first, he thought it was normal toddler defiance. The nannies tried different formulas, different foods, different approaches. But Celeste just stared at them with those enormous brown eyes and clamped her mouth shut. The doctors ran every test imaginable. Nothing was physically wrong. "She's depressed," one psychologist had suggested, and Donovan had nearly laughed in her face. "She's 2 years old," he'd snapped. 2-year-olds don't get depressed." But the psychologist had looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Children can feel abandonment, Mr. Ashford. They can sense when they're not wanted, not loved. and sometimes they respond by simply giving up. He'd fired her immediately, but her words had burrowed into his mind like splinters he couldn't remove. Now, standing alone in his office as darkness swallowed the lake, Donovan finally let himself ask the question he'd been avoiding. What kind of man lets his own daughter starve while he builds empires? What kind of father hides in his office because he's too afraid to face the consequences of his own emptiness? His hand trembled as he set down his whiskey glass. For the first time in years, maybe decades, Donovan Ashford felt something other than ambition or anger. He felt shame. Deep, burning shame that made him want to sink into the floor. His phone buzzed again, another urgent message that suddenly seemed meaningless. He turned it off. All of it. The calls, the emails, the constant noise that had let him avoid being human. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow he would go upstairs. Tomorrow he would try. But tonight, he just stood in the darkness of his office and let himself feel the weight of what he'd done. Outside, the lake turned black as the last light died, and somewhere above him, his daughter lay dying too. And it was his fault. Sheree spent the first 3 days simply being present. She didn't push Celeste to eat, didn't force conversation or interaction. She just existed in the space with her, humming old songs, reading picture books aloud, and occasionally talking about Amara. "My daughter loved butterflies," she'd say softly, showing Celeste a children's book with bright illustrations. She used to say they were angels in disguise, visiting us to remind us we're not alone. Celeste never responded, but her eyes followed Sheree's movements now, tracking her across the room with something that might have been curiosity. The other staff members watched with skepticism. "She's wasting time," the head housekeeper whispered to the cook. "That child is unreachable. We've all tried." But Sheree wasn't trying. She was just loving. And love, she'd learned, didn't work on timelines or measurable outcomes. Love just showed up and stayed, even when nothing seemed to change. On the 4th morning, Sheree brought her own breakfast up to the nursery, a simple meal of scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced strawberries. She sat on the floor as usual and began eating slowly, making small sounds of appreciation. These strawberries are sweet today," she said to no one in particular. "Almost as sweet as the ones my grandma used to grow in her little garden behind our building. We didn't have much space, just a tiny plot of dirt, but she made magic happen there." She took another bite, then set her plate on the floor between them, the same way she'd placed Amara's rabbit days before. "I'm pretty full," she said casually. "Would be ashamed to waste such good food." She didn't look at Celeste, didn't wait for a response. She just started singing softly, a song about morning and new beginnings. Minutes passed. Then, so slowly Sheree almost missed it, Celeste's tiny hand reached out and touched a strawberry. Sheree's heart nearly stopped, but she forced herself to keep singing, to not react, to not ruin this fragile moment with her own desperation. Celeste's fingers closed around the strawberry, lifted it slowly to her mouth. She sniffed it, hesitated, then took the smallest bite imaginable. Sheree felt tears burning behind her eyes, but kept them locked inside. One bite, just one, but it was everything. It was life choosing itself again. It was hope breaking through concrete. Celeste chewed slowly, her face uncertain, as if she'd forgotten what food was supposed to feel like. Then she took another bite, and another. Within 5 minutes, the strawberry was gone, and Celeste was reaching for a second one. Sheree let her take it, still singing, still pretending this was the most normal thing in the world. She didn't celebrate or call for the staff, or run to tell Mr. Ashford. She just let it be what it was, a child eating a strawberry. The breakthrough continued over the next 2 days. Celeste started eating small amounts whenever Sheree ate, mirroring her like a baby bird learning from its mother. Scrambled eggs, pieces of toast, apple slices. Nothing large, but enough to keep her alive, enough to bring color back to her cheeks. Sheree documented everything carefully, noting what Celeste accepted and what she refused, but she told no one. Not yet. She'd learned from Amara's illness that hope could be weaponized, that people would take a small victory and turn it into pressure for more, faster, bigger. Celeste needed time to remember how to want to live. She needed space to heal without the weight of everyone's expectations crushing down on her. So Sheree kept their secret, just the two of them sharing quiet meals on the nursery floor while the rest of the house went about its business, unaware that a miracle was happening right above their heads. But on the 6th day, everything changed. Donovan finally climbed the stairs to the nursery, driven by guilt and his assistant's insistent reports that something was different. He opened the door without knocking and froze. Celeste was sitting on the floor with Sheree, actually eating. A bowl of oatmeal sat between them, and his daughter, who hadn't eaten in 2 weeks, was lifting a spoon to her mouth. Sheree looked up at him with calm eyes, a finger to her lips in a gesture of silence. "Don't ruin this," her expression said. "Don't make this about you." Donovan stood paralyzed in the doorway, watching his daughter eat, and something inside his chest cracked open. It was such a simple thing, a child eating breakfast. But in that moment, it was the most profound thing he'd ever witnessed. Celeste finished the bite, then looked at him, really looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw a question he didn't know how to answer. "Where have you been? Why did you leave me alone?" He had no words, no excuses, just the crushing weight of his own failures staring back at him from his daughter's face. Donovan started showing up at the nursery every morning after that, awkward and uncertain, like a stranger trying to learn a foreign language. He would sit in the corner, watching Sheree work her quiet magic with Celeste, trying to understand what she did that he'd never been able to do. She made it look effortless, the way she spoke to Celeste like an equal, the way she noticed when the little girl was tired or overwhelmed, the way she created safety without saying a word. "You can come closer," Sheree said one morning, not looking at him. "She knows you're her father. She's just not sure if you're safe yet." The word stung like a slap. Safe. His own daughter didn't feel safe with him. Donovan moved to the floor slowly, his expensive suit wrinkling against the carpet, and sat several feet away. Celeste watched him warily, a piece of banana halfway to her mouth. Sheree kept talking softly about the birds outside the window, creating a bridge of normalcy that let Celeste relax again. The staff began to notice the change, not just in Celeste, but in Donovan. He canceled meetings to spend mornings in the nursery. He asked Sheree questions about child development, actually listening to her answers instead of dismissing them. He started reading the parenting books his assistant ordered, staying up late in his office, highlighting passages about attachment and trauma and repair. "You're studying your own daughter like a business problem," his brother Marcus said during a rare visit, watching Donovan take notes on a legal pad. "Maybe that's what it takes," Donovan replied quietly. "Maybe I need to approach this like I approach everything else until I figure out how to approach it like a father." Marcus shook his head. "You can't spreadsheet your way into her heart, Don. You have to feel something. You have to let yourself be vulnerable." The word made Donovan uncomfortable. Vulnerability was weakness. Vulnerability got you destroyed in his world. But watching Celeste slowly come back to life, he wondered if maybe vulnerability was actually the only real strength that mattered. Sheree maintained careful boundaries, professional but warm, never overstepping but never backing down when Donovan needed to hear hard truths. "She doesn't need your money," Sheree told him one afternoon when he tried to buy Celeste an elaborate playhouse. "She needs your presence. She needs you to show up even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't know what to say, even when you feel like you're failing. That's what children need, not perfection, but persistence." Donovan wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain how hard he was trying. But Sheree's eyes held no judgment, just patient honesty. She wasn't attacking him. She was teaching him. And for the first time in his adult life, Donovan Ashford became a student instead of a master. He started sitting on the floor during Celeste's meals, not talking, just being there. He learned to read her cues, when she needed space, when she wanted attention, when she was about to shut down. But the real breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Celeste had been playing with blocks while Sheree folded laundry nearby, and Donovan reviewed contracts on his laptop. Suddenly, Celeste's tower fell, blocks scattering across the floor. Her face crumpled, And for the first time in months, she cried. Not a silent tear, but a real, full-bodied toddler cry. Sheree didn't move, waiting to see what Donovan would do. Every instinct told him to fix it, to rebuild the tower, to stop the crying. But something Sheree had said echoed in his mind. Sometimes children need to feel their feelings before they can feel anything else. So Donovan set down his laptop, moved to where Celeste sat sobbing, and simply opened his arms. She hesitated, her cries stuttering to hiccups. Then, slowly, she crawled into his lap. Donovan wrapped his arms around her, feeling her tiny body shake against his chest, and something inside him shattered completely. He hadn't held her like this since she was an infant. He'd forgotten how small she was, how fragile, how desperately she needed him. "I'm sorry," Donovan whispered into her hair, his own voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. Daddy's been gone, but I'm here now. I'm here." Celeste didn't respond with words. She was too young, and trust too damaged to rebuild in a single moment. But she didn't pull away. She stayed in his arms, her crying gradually subsiding into shuddering breaths. Sheree watched from across the room, tears streaming down her own face, seeing not just a father holding his daughter, but a man finally learning what it meant to be present. When Celeste finally fell asleep in his arms, exhausted from emotion, Donovan looked at Sheree with raw, exposed eyes. "How do I make sure I never fail her like this again?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sheree wiped her cheeks and smiled gently. "You do what all of us do, Mr. Ashford. You wake up every day and choose her, over and over again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what love is. It's a choice you make every single morning." And in that moment, Donovan Ashford finally understood what he'd been missing all along. The doorbell rang on a Saturday morning, sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet peace that had settled over the house. Sheree was in the kitchen preparing Celeste's breakfast when she heard raised voices in the foyer. A woman's voice, desperate and angry. "I have rights. She's my daughter." Sheree's stomach dropped. She'd known this moment would come eventually. Vanessa Ashford had returned. Celeste was playing with wooden spoons on the kitchen floor, and Sheree quickly scooped her up, holding her close. "It's okay, sweet girl," she whispered, even as her own heart raced. Through the doorway, she could see Donovan facing a beautiful blonde woman in designer clothes, her face twisted with rage and pain. Vanessa's eyes were wild, darting around the foyer as if searching for something. "Where is she? Where is Celeste? I know she's been sick. I heard she almost died, and nobody called me." Donovan's voice was cold, controlled, everything Sheree had watched him work so hard to soften over the past weeks. "You gave up custody, Vanessa. You left. You don't get to show up now and make demands." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "I didn't give up anything. Your lawyers destroyed me in court. They made me look unstable, incompetent, dangerous to my own child. But I'm better now, Donovan. I've been in therapy. I'm on the right medication. I have a job, an apartment. I'm ready to be her mother again." She took a step forward, and Donovan moved to block her path. "You can't just walk back into her life. She's fragile. She's just starting to heal." Vanessa's face crumpled. "Heal from what? What did you do to her?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Donovan had no answer that wouldn't confirm his guilt. He'd done this. His neglect had nearly killed their daughter, and now Vanessa was here to collect the consequences. Sheree made a decision. She walked into the foyer with Celeste still in her arms, and both parents turned to stare at her. Vanessa's eyes locked on Celeste, and her face transformed with desperate love. "Baby," she breathed, reaching out with trembling hands. "Oh, my baby, Mama's here." But Celeste buried her face in Sheree's neck, her tiny body going rigid with fear. She didn't know this woman, didn't remember her. Vanessa's hands dropped, her expression shattering into grief. "She doesn't even know me," she whispered. "My own daughter doesn't know me." Sheree's heart broke for everyone in this moment, for the mother who'd lost her child, for the father who'd nearly destroyed his, and for the little girl caught between them. "Maybe we should all sit down and talk," Sheree suggested quietly. "Yelling in the foyer isn't helping anyone. especially not Celeste. Vanessa wiped her eyes and nodded. Donovan looked like he wanted to refuse, but Sheree's gaze held firm. They needed to do this. For Celeste's sake, they needed to find a way forward. They settled in the living room, an awkward tableau of broken family dynamics. Sheree sat with Celeste on the couch, positioning herself between the parents who sat on opposite chairs like opposing attorneys. Vanessa couldn't stop staring at Celeste, drinking in every detail of the daughter she hadn't seen in over a year. "She's gotten so big," Vanessa said softly, "and so thin. What happened? Why did she stop eating?" Donovan's jaw tightened, but Sheree spoke before he could. "She was lonely," Sheree said simply. "Children can't thrive on food and shelter alone. They need love, connection, presence. She was starving for her parents, and when she couldn't have that, she stopped fighting altogether." The words weren't an attack, just truth delivered with compassion. Both parents flinched like they'd been struck. Vanessa covered her mouth, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Donovan stared at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. The silence stretched, heavy with regret and recognition. "I want to see her," Vanessa finally said. "Regularly. I want supervised visits, therapy if we need it, whatever it takes. But I can't walk away again. I won't." She looked at Donovan with defiant pain. "I know I wasn't strong enough before. I know I failed her. But so did you, Donovan. So did you." Donovan met her gaze, and for the first time since Vanessa had arrived, his armor cracked. "You're right," he said quietly. "I failed her completely. I was so focused on winning against you that I forgot what we were fighting for. But she's eating now. She's starting to trust again. And I won't let anyone destroy that progress, including you, including me." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Then we do this together. Not as husband and wife, but as her parents. We put her first this time. Actually first, not just in words, but in actions." It was the most mature conversation either of them had ever had about their daughter. Sheree felt Celeste relax slightly in her arms, as if even at 2 years old, she could sense the shift from war to truce. This was far from over, but it was a start. A fragile, broken start toward something that might eventually look like healing. The custody arrangement began slowly. Vanessa came to the house 3 times a week for supervised visits, always with Sheree present. The first few visits were painful. Celeste would cling to Sheree, refusing to even look at Vanessa, while her mother sat across the room, trying not to cry. Donovan watched from the doorway, torn between protective instinct and the knowledge that Celeste needed her mother, that she deserved the chance to know the woman who'd given birth to her. Sheree became the bridge between them, gently encouraging Celeste to accept a toy from Vanessa, to sit near her, to slowly remember what a mother's love could feel like. "She doesn't trust easily anymore," Sheree explained to Vanessa during one particularly difficult visit. "You have to earn it back, one tiny moment at a time, just like her father is learning to do." Vanessa nodded, wiping her eyes, and tried again. And slowly, painfully slowly, Celeste began to soften. But everything changed when Vanessa's lawyer filed a motion for joint custody. The papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who had no idea he was carrying a bomb. Donovan read them in his office, his face going pale and then red with rage. Joint custody, 50-50 time split. Vanessa wanted to take Celeste to her small apartment on the west side, wanted to have her overnight, wanted to be an equal parent. Donovan stormed upstairs to the nursery where Sheree was teaching Celeste her colors. "She's trying to take her," he said, his voice shaking. "After everything, after nearly losing her, Vanessa thinks she can just take her away half the time." Sheree looked at him calmly, even as her own heart sank. "Can we talk outside?" She handed Celeste a board book and led Donovan into the hallway, closing the door softly behind them. "She's not taking her," Sheree said quietly. "She's asking to parent her. There's a difference." Donovan shook his head violently. "I won't allow it. I'll fight this. My lawyers will bury her again." Sheree grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "And what will that do to Celeste? Another court battle?" Another war where she's the prize instead of the priority? Is that what you want for her? Donovan's face contorted with fear disguised as anger. What if Vanessa fails again? What if she has another breakdown? What if Celeste stops eating again and there's nobody there who knows how to reach her? Sheree's expression softened. Those are valid fears, Mr. Ashford, but you can't protect Celeste from every possibility of pain. She needs her mother. You've seen how she started to light up when Vanessa sings to her. You've seen her reach for Vanessa's hand. That's healing too. Painful healing, but healing nonetheless. Donovan leaned against the wall, all his power and control useless in the face of this impossible situation. I don't know how to let go, he admitted. I don't know how to share her when I've only just learned how to have her. The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Vanessa's visits intensified, and Sheree began preparing Celeste for the possibility of overnights with her mother. She used picture books and simple words, talking about how some children have 2 houses, 2 bedrooms, 2 places where they're loved. Celeste didn't understand completely, but she didn't resist like she once would have. Vanessa proved herself committed, showing up early, staying late, learning Celeste's routines and preferences. She memorized which songs calmed her, which food she preferred, which stuffed animals brought her comfort. Donovan watched it all with a mixture of admiration and jealousy, seeing Vanessa step into a role he'd barely begun to understand himself. One evening, after Vanessa left, he found Sheree cleaning up toys in the nursery. She's a good mother, he said quietly. When she's well, she's a really good mother. Better than I've been a father. Sheree looked at him with understanding. You're both learning. That's all any of us can do. The night before the hearing, Sheree found Donovan sitting in the nursery, watching Celeste sleep in her crib. She'd started sleeping through the night now, no longer waking with silent screams like she had in those first terrible weeks. I'm scared, Donovan admitted without looking at Sheree. I'm terrified that if I lose her, even for half the time, I'll lose everything that matters. Sheree sat down beside him on the floor. You won't lose her, Mr. Ashford. Love doesn't work like that. It doesn't divide when it's shared. It multiplies. Celeste having 2 parents who love her doesn't mean she loves each of you less. It means she gets to be fuller, more whole. Donovan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Sheree never expected to hear from the cold, controlled billionaire she'd met 2 months ago. I need to pray, he said. I don't know how, and I'm not sure I believe in it, but I need to try something bigger than myself. Sheree smiled gently. Then let me teach you. And there in the darkness of the nursery, she took his hand and prayed aloud, not for victory in court, but for wisdom, for healing, for everyone involved to see what was truly best for Celeste. Donovan listened with tears streaming down his face, and when she finished, he whispered his first real prayer. Please help me be the father she deserves. The courtroom was smaller than Donovan expected, less dramatic than the corporate battlefields where he usually fought his wars. Vanessa sat at the opposite table with her lawyer, looking both hopeful and terrified. Her parents were behind her for support, their faces hard when they looked at Donovan. He couldn't blame them. He destroyed their daughter in court before, and they had every reason to hate him. His own lawyer, a shark named Mitchell who'd never lost a custody case, sat beside him reviewing notes. We've got this, Mitchell whispered. Her employment is shaky. Her apartment is barely suitable, and we have documentation of her previous mental health episodes. The judge will see reason. But Donovan's stomach churned. He'd asked Mitchell to pursue a different strategy, one focused on gradual integration rather than total victory. Mitchell had looked at him like he'd grown a second head. You're paying me to win, not compromise, Mitchell had said. But this wasn't a business deal. This was his daughter's life. The judge entered, a black woman in her 60s with kind but no-nonsense eyes. Judge Harrington had a reputation for seeing through legal games and cutting straight to what mattered. Both lawyers presented their cases. Mitchell painted Vanessa as unstable and unreliable, using her past against her like a weapon. Vanessa's lawyer countered with evidence of her recovery, her stable employment at a nonprofit, her regular therapy attendance, her completely transformed living situation. Donovan watched Vanessa's face crumple with each of Mitchell's attacks, watched her try to hold herself together while her past was dissected for the court. He felt sick. This was exactly what he'd done before. Won at any cost. Destroyed a human being to claim victory. When Mitchell sat down, looking satisfied, Donovan stood up without permission. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Mitchell grabbed his arm, hissing, "What are you doing?" But Donovan shook him off. Judge Harrington raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Ashford, you have legal representation." "I need to say this myself," Donovan insisted. Judge Harrington considered him for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead." Donovan took a deep breath, aware of every eye in the courtroom on him. "I asked my lawyer to fight this custody motion because that's what I've always done. Fight, win, crush the opposition. But my daughter almost died because of how I've lived my life. She stopped eating because I stopped seeing her. Not because she was sick or defiant, but because she was alone, completely alone in a house full of people." His voice cracked, but he pushed forward. "Vanessa isn't perfect. Neither am I. But our daughter needs both of us. She needs her mother's warmth and her father's commitment. She needs to know she's not a prize to be won, but a person to be loved. I'm asking this court not to rule in my favor. I'm asking for whatever arrangement gives Celeste the best chance at a real childhood with two parents who put her first." The courtroom was dead silent. Mitchell's mouth hung open. Vanessa had tears streaming down her face. Judge Harrington leaned back, studying Donovan like he was a puzzle she hadn't expected. "Ms. Ashford, do you have anything to add?" the judge asked. Vanessa stood, her voice shaking. "I was broken when I left. I couldn't be the mother she needed, and Donovan was right to fight for custody then. I wasn't well, but I am now. I've done the work, Your Honor. I've faced my demons, taken my medication, built a support system. I'm not asking to take Celeste away from her father. I'm asking for the chance to be her mother again, to share responsibility, share time, share love." She looked at Donovan. "I've hated you for 2 years, Donovan, but watching you these past weeks, seeing how you've changed, how you fought to connect with her, I think we can actually do this. Together, not as husband and wife, but as parents who both love the same little girl." Judge Harrington made notes, her face unreadable. Finally, she set down her pen and looked at both of them. "I'm going to order a 30-day gradual integration plan. Weekend visits that increase to overnights, supervised at first, then independent. We'll reconvene in 30 days to assess how it's going. If both of you can demonstrate consistent co-parenting and Celeste continues to thrive, we'll formalize joint custody." The gavel came down, and it was over. Not a victory, not a defeat, just a beginning. Donovan and Vanessa stood in the courthouse hallway afterward, awkward and uncertain. "Thank you," Vanessa said quietly, "for not fighting dirty this time." Donovan nodded. "I'm sorry. For everything before. For what my lawyers did to you. You were sick, and I used it against you instead of helping you get better." Vanessa wiped her eyes. "We both made mistakes. Let's just try not to make them with her anymore." They stood in silence for a moment. Two people who'd once loved each other enough to create a child, now strangers learning to be allies. "There's someone you should meet," Donovan said finally. "The woman who saved Celeste. Who saved me, really. Her name is Sheree." Vanessa nodded. "The maid Celeste talks about during visits. The one who sings." "She's more than a maid," Donovan said. I don't know what we'd do without her." Something passed between them then, an understanding that Celeste's survival had required someone who wasn't damaged by their shared history, someone who could love her without the weight of their failures. And they were both grateful that someone had showed up when they'd needed her most. The first overnight visit was scheduled for 3 weeks later, and as the day approached, Donovan began to unravel. He second-guessed everything. Was Vanessa really ready? Was Celeste? Was he? He started calling Vanessa multiple times a day with instructions, questions, concerns. Does she know Celeste needs her blue blanket to sleep? Does she have the right formula? What if Celeste cries and won't stop? Vanessa handled it with patience at first, But by day 3, she snapped. Donovan, you have to trust me. I'm her mother. I gave birth to her. I know how to take care of a baby. She's not a baby anymore, Donovan shot back. She's a traumatized toddler who just learned to eat again. One wrong move and she could relapse. The conversation ended with both of them angry and scared, and Sheree had to intervene. She sat with Donovan in his office that evening. You can't control this, she said gently. You can't prevent every possible problem. You have to let go and trust the process. Donovan's hand shook as he poured whiskey he wouldn't drink. I can't lose her again. I can't. 2 days before the overnight visit, Celeste got sick. Just a regular toddler cold. But to Donovan it felt like a sign, like the universe confirming his worst fears. She was congested and cranky, refusing to eat as much as usual, and Donovan immediately called Vanessa to cancel the visit. She's sick. We need to postpone. But Vanessa pushed back. Kids get colds, Donovan. That doesn't mean you cancel everything. I can take care of a sick child. Not this child, Donovan said, his voice hard. She's fragile. You don't understand. Vanessa's voice turned cold. I understand perfectly. You don't trust me. You never have, and you never will. This isn't about Celeste being sick. This is about you wanting to stay in control. She hung up, and Donovan stared at his phone, feeling the situation spiraling. Sheree, who'd been listening from the doorway, shook her head. You're going to lose what you've built with Vanessa if you keep this up. She's right. You're looking for reasons to sabotage this. Donovan wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The fear had taken over again, drowning out reason. That night, Sheree sat with Celeste while the little girl struggled to sleep through her congestion. Donovan paced the nursery like a caged animal. What if she chokes? What if her fever spikes? What if Vanessa doesn't know what to do? Sheree had reached her limit. She stood, walked over to Donovan, and grabbed both his arms. Stop. Just stop. You're not protecting her. You're suffocating her with your fear. Do you know why Celeste stopped eating in the first place? Because she felt your emotional absence so deeply that she didn't want to exist anymore. If you keep smothering her with anxious control, you'll create a different kind of damage. Children need to feel their parents' confidence, their trust that the world is safe enough to explore. Right now, you're teaching her that everything is dangerous, that she can't handle normal life, that people will always let her down. Donovan stared at her, the truth cutting through his defenses. I don't know how to stop being afraid, he whispered. Sheree's voice softened. You don't stop being afraid. You just don't let fear make your decisions. The morning of the overnight visit arrived. Celeste's cold had improved, and the doctor had cleared her for normal activities. Donovan packed her bag with trembling hands, extra clothes, medicines, comfort items, emergency contacts. He'd made lists, checked them 3 times, and still felt unprepared. When Vanessa arrived, the tension between the adults was thick enough to cut. Celeste, sensitive as always to emotional undercurrents, started to whimper. Sheree stepped in immediately, scooping up the little girl. Hey, sweet girl, remember what we talked about? You go to Mama's house for a whole night. You'll sleep in your special room there and have so much fun. Celeste looked uncertain, but didn't cry. Vanessa reached for her, and after a moment's hesitation, Celeste allowed herself to be transferred. Donovan's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to shed. Call me if anything happens, he said, his voice rough. Anything at all. Vanessa nodded. I will. I promise. She buckled Celeste into the car seat and drove away, leaving Donovan standing in the driveway, watching until the car disappeared. The house felt empty without Celeste. Donovan wandered from room to room, unable to focus on work, unable to rest. By evening, he called Vanessa twice for updates. Both times, she'd sent back photos. Celeste eating dinner, Celeste in the bath, Celeste reading a book. Everything was fine. But Donovan couldn't shake the anxiety churning in his gut. Around midnight, his phone rang. His heart stopped. It was Vanessa. What's wrong? He answered, already reaching for his keys. Vanessa sounded tired but calm. Nothing's wrong. She's sleeping. I just thought you might need to hear that. She ate all her dinner, took her medicine without fussing, and went down at 8 o'clock. She asked for you once, and we looked at pictures of you on my phone. Then she fell asleep holding her stuffed rabbit. Donovan's breath came out in a rush. She's really okay? She's really okay, Donovan. Better than okay. She's happy. After they hung up, Donovan sat alone in his dark office and finally let himself cry. Not tears of fear or grief, but tears of release. His daughter was safe. She was loved. She was going to be okay. And he hadn't needed to control everything for that to be true. Sheree found him there an hour later, his face tear-stained but peaceful. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him in the darkness, and they waited together for morning to bring Celeste home. 6 months later, the Ashford house looked different, not in its physical structure, but in the life that filled it. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. Toys scattered across the living room in organized chaos. Laughter echoed through halls that had once been silent as tombs. Celeste had transformed from the hollow-eyed ghost child into a vibrant, chatty toddler who ran everywhere and asked endless questions. She split her time between Donovan's estate and Vanessa's apartment, thriving in both places because both parents had learned to put her needs above their pride. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with coordination and communication, but they were trying, really trying, and Celeste could feel the difference. She had 2 homes now, 2 bedrooms, 2 places where she was the center of someone's world, and she was blooming like a flower finally given water and light. Sheree had stayed on, though her role had evolved beyond Maid into something the family couldn't quite name. Part nanny, part therapist, part guardian angel. Donovan had offered her a permanent position with a salary that made her grandmother cry when she told her. But more than the money, Sheree stayed because she'd fallen in love with this broken family learning to heal. She saw Amara and Celeste sometimes, the same curiosity, the same giggle, and instead of hurting, it brought her peace. Her daughter's death hadn't been meaningless. It had prepared her for this, for Celeste, for this moment when a child needed exactly what Sheree had to give. One Sunday morning, Sheree was in the kitchen making pancakes when Celeste toddled in, dragging her stuffed rabbit. "Mama's coming today?" she asked, her vocabulary exploding now that she felt safe enough to use her voice. "Yes, baby," Sheree confirmed. "Mama's picking you up after breakfast." Celeste climbed into her chair, content with the answer. No anxiety, no fear, just acceptance of her new normal. Donovan came downstairs, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, clothes Sheree had never imagined him wearing in those first cold months. He'd changed in more than his wardrobe. His face had softened. His shoulders had relaxed. He smiled more, laughed easier, touched more. The walls he'd built around himself had crumbled, and the man underneath was someone worth knowing. He poured coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Celeste, helping her color while they waited for pancakes. "Daddy, look." Celeste held up her picture, a scribbled rainbow. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Donovan said, and meant it. His phone buzzed with work emails, but he silenced it without looking. Work could wait. This moment with his daughter couldn't. Sheree watched them together, remembering the hollow-eyed billionaire who'd been too afraid to sit on the floor with his own child. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Vanessa arrived right on time, and instead of the awkward exchanges from before, she came inside for coffee. She and Donovan had developed a friendship of sorts, built on their shared love for Celeste and their mutual recognition of how close they'd come to losing everything. "She's doing so well," Vanessa said, watching Celeste play. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong, but she just keeps getting stronger." Donovan nodded, "Because she finally has what she needed all along. Both of us, present and trying. And Sheree." They both looked at her, and Sheree felt suddenly self-conscious. "I just showed up," she said quietly. "You two did the real work." But Donovan shook his head. "You did more than show up. You taught us how to love her, how to see her. You saved her life, Sheree, and you saved mine too." Vanessa raised her coffee cup. "To Sheree, the angel we didn't deserve but desperately needed." They clinked cups, and Celeste, not wanting to be left out, banged her juice cup on the table, making them all laugh. As Vanessa loaded Celeste into the car for their weekend together, Donovan stood in the driveway with Sheree, watching his daughter wave goodbye without tears. "I never thought this would be possible," he said. "6 months ago, I was planning her funeral in my head. Now look at her." Sheree smiled. "Children are resilient when we give them what they need. Love, consistency, safety, presence. Those aren't complicated things, Mr. Ashford. They're just hard things for adults who forgot how to access their own hearts." Donovan turned to her. "I want to do something for you. Name it. Anything." Sheree had been expecting this conversation. She'd thought long and hard about what she wanted. There are so many children like Celeste was. Not in mansions, but in foster homes and shelters and hospitals. Children who've given up because nobody showed them they matter. I want to start a foundation. Use my experience to train others, to reach the unreachable kids. And I need your help to do it." Donovan's eyes lit up with purpose. "Done. We'll call it Amara's house, in honor of your daughter." Sheree's eyes filled with tears. She would have loved that. The foundation launched 3 months later, a bright modern building on Chicago's west side where children who'd been labeled hopeless could come for intensive therapeutic care. Sheree ran it with the same gentle wisdom she'd brought to Celeste, and Donovan funded it with enthusiasm that had been missing from his business ventures for years. This mattered. This was legacy. Vanessa volunteered as a counselor, using her own story of breakdown and recovery to reach desperate mothers who thought they'd failed beyond redemption. And Celeste, now 3 years old and thriving, would sometimes visit with her parents, bringing books to read to the other children, showing them that healing was possible. The little girl who hadn't eaten for 2 weeks had become a symbol of hope, proof that love could reach the unreachable, that broken things could be mended, that families could be rebuilt from ashes. And it all started because one woman chose to show up, to sit on the floor, and to hum an old song until a dying child remembered how to live. That was the impossible. That was the miracle. And that was just the beginning.